Shrinks Wrap is brought to you by West Coast Mindfulness Institute, a networking group for mindfulness-oriented clinicians. Shrinks Wrap is a psychology podcast where we introduce you to leading clinicians and thinkers and their personal journeys through the field. While we hope you enjoy this dive into the psyche, please note that this podcast is not intended to be therapy or a replacement for therapy. To learn more about us or to find a therapist, visit wcminstitute.net.
Welcome, podcast listeners, to another episode of Shrinks Wrap. And due to high demand, we have back in our studio Charlie and Linda Bloom, who are in San Francisco today, working on one of their manuscripts. It's shocking but true that, I don't know, life is what happens in the margins of them writing, I think. Anyway, so here they are. So here they are again, working on a book. Maybe they'll tell us what it is. We'll find out. But, you know, we are going to also visit. I'm holding up the book here. I have a personal copy of, nobody can see it because we're on audio. And Into Arguing, 101 Valuable Lessons for All Relationships. And some of you remember their seminal book, 101 Things I Wish I Knew When I Got Married. And so a little bit of a callback to that title. So the other thing is I want to mention that, because, a little shameless self-promotion here, they're going to have a Human Potential Conference November 1st at the Hillside Club in Berkeley, and we roped them into another talk, and they're gonna open up and discuss various things. But the conference is about sex, love, and rock and roll, all three. And so they're going to dovetail their talk and tailor a little bit to that. So we're really excited to have them at that conference at the Hillside Club, and you can get those tickets on Eventbrite. And you can, if you go to that conference, you might even get a signed copy of their book. But in the meantime, you can order the books online. But let's go ahead and just jump into some of the dialogue. So was it a long trip from Santa Cruz to San Francisco? Did you make it okay?
It was enjoyable. It's beautiful, and the spring has sprung, and we take the highway by the ocean, and we brainstorm and talk all the way here. So we're all already doing our writing retreat in the car on the way.
That's one of the most beautiful drives. That Highway 1 between Santa Cruz and the city is phenomenal. It's great. It's inspiring. I don't like it at night, but during the daylight, I'll do it anytime. So I'm gonna dive right into your book. Let's just go right into it. Is that okay? Can we just go right into the book a little bit? All right.
Let's go.
Okay. So I want to talk to you about. There's certain chapters that jumped out for me that I want to get into with you a little bit. So chapter 4, where you discuss transforming desire into intention and talked about denying what we want. I'm wondering if you could shed a little light about this idea of how to transform desire into intention. And I always had this saying, I don't know if this makes any sense to you, but intention or purpose determines outcome. And sometimes a desire that could be an intention could be a sense of purpose in a relationship and could lead to an outcome that's desirable, maybe. I don't know. But I'm wondering what your thoughts are about that. What do you think?
I think you're making a really important distinction here, Jim, in terms of what exactly is it that determines the difference between those two things. And you use the term a sense of something. And I think intention differs in that quality of there is a sense that this is not simply a preference or a wish or a hope or a desire, but it's something that's compelling, something that has actually possessed us in a way that it feels like we can't say no to it. The thing that a lot of people do get caught up in is that, well, if there's something that I really am clear that I have an intention for this, then it's just going to happen. But intention doesn't necessarily mean that that's all you have to have. It's just this clear, compelling desire. It means that you are prepared to take the steps that are necessary to fulfill the vision that you have. And it's something that's way beyond a simple preference or a hope or a desire.
Yeah,
say something about it.
I want to underscore what Charlie's saying, that it's a mighty, forceful, but respectful way to open up a conversation, to announce your intention. And back in the day when I first started to find out how powerful it was, I used to call it introductory remarks, because I was a little phobic about bringing up the tough topics. And so announcing my intention before I would get into the meat of the matter, whatever it is that I wanted or needed, I would say to Charlie, I have something really important that I want to talk to you about. I have something heavy laying on my heart. I want you to hear me out. Would you be willing? And asking him if this was a good time was a very respectful way to do it, because I had to learn the hard way that when I launched in, he wasn't always ready. He was ambushed. And so when I would invite him to the conversation, and I would relieve him by saying, I just want to talk about myself. I want to talk about what I'm feeling. I want to talk about what I'm needing. It gave him a little bit more peace of mind to open to me and what I was bringing to him. And so announcing our intention at the beginning of especially a difficult conversation, that I just want you to understand where it is that I stand about this. I want you to appreciate my point of view. It keeps people from feeling defensive, like they're getting ready to have a fight, that somebody's trying to coerce them into something, which is very different. And Charlie's absolutely right. It's an intention is stronger than a desire, because a lot of people have needs and desires, but they don't go public with their prayer and tell the other person for fear that it might start a fight, or the person might feel put upon or something like that. So just having an agreement in place that when you have a strong need about something, that you're entitled to speak it aloud to the other person. They're not obligated to meet it.
Yeah.
But it's nice. It shows respect to hear it out.
Well, there's about 7 nuggets in what you said. I'm going to say a few of them. One is that nobody wants a drive-by conversation.
Right.
Okay. That doesn't feel good. You can feel ambush, as you said. So that's one piece. The other thing is, I think there's a neurophysiological piece, that when we feel not ready emotionally to receive a conversation that might be heavy, that could be intense, a high level of, it might activate us. It's nice to have a little bit of a choice or a warning or a preamble before we get into it. It's almost like conversational foreplay before you have the big conversation. And it allows you to ease into it and kind of lubricate the dialogue so that you can have it. So I think it would help people feel less defensive. And I think defensiveness is a nemesis of connection. When we aren't really artful about how to not make someone feel defensive or act defensive, we're not aware and artful about that, it can be a problem. So I can see how this could reduce the detonation charge for that, allow people to be less defensive. And that's always a good thing. And when somebody's receptive. And the other thing is, I know you talk a lot about this in one of your principles about how important it is to reveal versus conceal. Because if you're not clear about your intentions, then you're holding back a lot of information. You're concealing your truth and what you really, really want. And that can be a problem, right?
Yeah, it can be really threatening to the other person if your intention is something that includes them. Like, my intention is for you to be more receptive to the things that I'm saying. Or even sometimes us, the focus of an intention really has to emanate from a willingness to take responsibility for doing whatever I personally need to do to bring this outcome about. So, for example, if I'm in a relationship in which I'm feeling like there's not as much closeness or intimacy as I would like to have, an intention that would be workable and productive would be something along the lines of I am really committed to doing whatever I can do to bring about the conditions that would promote this experience that I really desire. So it has a lot to do with responsibility.
Well, that's an interesting point, because you're saying if I just state an intention, I just delegate all the responsibility to the person who's listening, and I get off the hook.
Yeah, exactly.
Now I don't have to do anything. You just got to hold it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. Yeah, my intention is for you to whatever.
Yeah.
That doesn't work too well.
Yeah.
Setting the stage for a productive conversation where both people really learn and grow in understanding. I'm fond of the phrase that John Gottman used. I really respect his work a lot. And he emphasizes softened startup.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think easing in gently, you know, that people don't feel like it's a drive-by shooting, and they don't feel like it's a hit and run, that you're going to, you know, throw something at them and then disappear. My intention is that we stay in conversation about this until we really learn each other's point of view about it and see if we can find any common ground.
Yeah, I agree. That does remind me of the softened startup as well. That's a piece of, seems like what you're talking about. And then also somebody can say, I'm not in a place to hear it. You know, I know that's up for you right now, but I'm not in a really good place to hear it. And that could happen too. And so there's an opportunity maybe to revisit it at a different time, or without blowing that person off, without dismissing them. That could be also true, right? Where, yeah, I know this is important to you, I can see that, but I'm really not in a great place to hear this right now.
And that's a gift, because if the person's not in a good place to really dialogue with you, you're better off knowing that. So you're not throwing yourself against the stone wall and getting battered and bruised. You want to have conducive conditions so that you have a successful outcome.
Exactly. That's true. You know, that's a really valuable lesson there. I want to shift a little bit. It's an interesting one about why winning doesn't work. And that's in chapter 54, for those of you who are indexing this conversation. Wanted to, because that's, you know, there's this thing called the Thomas Kilmann inventory, and it's the conflict inventory. Couples use it, companies use it, and it looks at what is your conflict style. And one, I think a lot of us just intuitively get this, that one is competitiveness, one is collaboration, one is cooperation, one is avoidance. You know, some of those things tie into attachment styles as well. But when you have two people who are trying to win at the same time, win an argument, win in terms of power brokering in the relationship, winning in terms of getting, having more leverage, or, for various reasons. I don't, I just wonder if you could speak a little bit to the role of that versus how do you create a win-win for both people? I'm just curious if you have thoughts about that.
Yeah, I think that the word win itself has implicit in that term is lose, because there has to be a loser if there's a winner. And if you begin to look at differences in terms of one of us is going to be getting what they want, the winner, and the other one is going to be diminished in some way, then you're approaching the whole dialogue from a perspective that's pretty much setting it up for it to be adversarial. Because if one person is taking that attitude, then the other person is in a position where they have to compete with them on those terms, or else kind of deal with it from a disadvantaged position. So we don't like to use, terms like winning and losing. It's really, I think, a lot more productive to look at it in terms of levels of satisfaction that we each can create in the dialogue. Yeah. So how can we both complete this interaction, or at least get the process going in a way that results in both of us having some sense of satisfaction, because if only one of us feels satisfied, or if one of us feels like we're the winner and the other one doesn't, as many of us have discovered, that person who has, quote, lost is going to, in some way, feel less engaged or less positive about the relationship, because they're likely to feel that somehow they've lost something in the process. So that can show up in the future, in terms of passive aggressive behavior. It can show up, in terms of more frequent arguing. That basically, as Wavy Gravy says, nobody gets away with nothing. It's just that's karma. If you win at somebody else's expense, you've lost something in the process, whether you recognize it or not. It'll come back.
What about competitive Scrabble or Wordle? Does that what do you do in those situations?
Those games are set up for competition. I don't think there's anything wrong with
okay.
It doesn't produce the same kind of a result in a relationship, maybe, but sure. Yeah.
All right. Okay. Linda, were you going to say something? You look like you're
Yeah, I think that there are many arenas where there can be winner and loser, and it works out fine.
Okay. Yeah.
But in romantic partnerships, as soon as you have a loser, both people lose. The only way that you can have success in romantic partnership if both people win, because when somebody feels that they have been sacrificed, thrown under the bus, that their needs and feelings aren't as important as the other person, the trust erodes every time. The level of intimacy erodes every time. So it always comes back to bite you on the ass. You wouldn't want to do it to yourself.
Yeah.
You wouldn't want to win at the other person's expense, because it's going to, it's going to create a disconnect. You won't have as much closeness. You won't have as much great sex, and you'll be irritable for the next time you have to deal with something, that you won't feel generous of spirit to stretch into their world and find a way that you can more peacefully, harmoniously exist together.
And you won't be able to inflate your ego if you do all that. I mean, how are you going to inflate your own ego?
And that is the point, of course, as we all know. I mean, why else would you want to be in a relationship with anybody unless it was going to inflate your ego? But no, seriously, the thing, it's really not easy to do what we're talking about here, because we live in a culture that is so geared towards winning and losing, towards accumulating or diminishing.
That's right.
It's in the air that we breathe. These attitudes are reinforced and have been reinforced to us throughout our lives, continually. It shows up in business. It shows up in all kinds of, in education. It shows up in every domain.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying, again, that there's something wrong with competition, but there's a certain context. Relationship is one of them, in which competing with somebody and designating them in your thinking as an adversary is not going to produce the result that you wanted to produce. It's just, and so we've got to deal with that predisposition that we all have. It's a habit, just approach my desire.
I think I agree. I'm tempted to veer off a little bit, and I'll try to come back. But in our political arena right now, there's obviously a great divide, brought on by social media and the algorithms that push us to the edges of aggravation, fear, and anger, often to get more clicks, and right. And so I think it's interesting how even in couplehood, a lot of times there's competitiveness over which person you vote for, which person you barrack for, that can run that level. That if you're not on my team, which is whatever color you are, blue or red, then you're the other. And there could be an otherism kind of thing occurring here. And then competitiveness over otherism process can happen. So it's interesting. I've seen with couples more conflict over you're on the losing team, I'm on the winning political team. If you don't join my team, then you're part of the losers kind of thing. And so it transcends a lot of areas these days. It's really interesting how it's infiltrated relationships.
Mm. Yeah. With that attitude, a lot of us feel that we need to do something to coerce the other person to come over and agree that our view is correct. But I think a lot of that comes from anxiety and fear that if we're not on the same page, then that could really lead to trouble in our relationship. So we've got to get on the same page about this. And since I am committed to being right about what I believe is true, when each person has that same attachment to the correctness of their perspective, that's what we're talking about when we refer to arguments. When both people are trying to coerce in their own ways, manipulate the other person's perspective in a way that they come around to theirs, and they get into those loops, and they spiral down into that rabbit hole.
Yeah.
We're not even saying that there's anything wrong with having a good, healthy argument. We're referring to those cycles in which both people are locked into positions in which they're trying to coerce the other person to agree with them. And that's
exactly. That's a real issue, I think, for a lot of people. And we know that psychological health is dependent somewhat on psychological flexibility. Mm-hmm. His ability to, be agile and see different views and hold different positions. And that's a healthy thing, to be open-hearted, open-minded when you're exploring topics. Segueing into another chapter you have, which is, there's this old expression, discretion is a better part of valor. Mm-hmm. Terrence Real talks about this idea of unbridled communication, where we just say whatever's on our mind and we don't edit anything we say. It's just whatever, it's primary consciousness. It's on my mind. I'm going to say it without, even editing anything, because I'm thinking it, therefore I have to say it idea. And then you wrote in your chapter, it's about sometimes it's better to say nothing. That was one of the mm-hmm. chapters you have in the book. And, there's this idea of, not concealing things and revealing things. And there's this other idea about being discretionary about what you say, maybe how you say it, when you say it, what's the benefit of saying it, sort of that cost-benefit analysis of doing that. In terms of conflict, if I said everything I thought all the time, I can't imagine how much conflict I have in my life. Everything that popped in my head, I said it. I can't imagine what would happen. Mm. It'd be tempting. It's like watching Curb Your Enthusiasm. Larry David says everything he thinks. If you ever watched the show Curb Your Enthusiasm, it's funny, but it's problematic for Larry David on Curb Your Enthusiasm. Mm-hmm. What do you think about that?
I think it's really important to be careful, tactful, respectful, loving, and honest. And it's a piece of work to get all those things lined up. And those people who blurt whatever it is they're thinking and feeling, they're going to have so much trouble in their life. People are not going to want to relate to them because you get burned, with things that they say. When we're working with our clients and when we're teaching our students, and we offer it in the book as well, there is a way to be in integrity with yourself and to be able to speak the truth of your experience, what you feel and what you need, without blame and judgment that invites defensiveness and arguments back. But there's a place that you speak from, which is often very vulnerable, tender place, where we're afraid, where we feel lonely, where we feel hurt. Do you know? And that is the vulnerability that people are, they're worried about opening up that much. But that is distinct from speaking from our thinking, which is often filled with opinions that are critical And that's what invites the arguments coming back, and the make wrong, and the blame, and the shame, and the guilt tripping, and the manipulation, and all those unskillful means. So when people start to realize that they can not just stuff it down and hold it in, that they can find a way to speak, but it's very refined and shows care and respect while they're speaking their truth.
That's good. It is hard to hold all those things, but important. The other thing I thought was interesting you touched on that I don't see, spoken about enough was this idea of power in a relationship and the connection between power differential and conflict or arguments. That there's this, I think there's always this sense of who's alpha, if you will, and who's beta in a relationship. And sometimes that's an accurate perception, sometimes it's not. But this idea about how power is shared or held in a relationship can certainly lead to conflict. And I'm wondering your thoughts about that.
Well, power is an essential ingredient in all relationships, not just romantic partnerships. But there's so much confusion, I think, that so many of us have about the difference between power and control. A lot of people see power as something that can be utilized in very damaging, dangerous ways. And some people see power as a good thing to be attained because it enables you to get more of what you want. And power is really, it's neither good nor bad. It depends upon the intention behind the use of the power. So it literally means the capacity to be effective.
Okay.
And so depending upon what your desire is, if you can be powerful in a relationship without exploiting the other person or without having the intention to exploit them. And it really depends upon what's the intention. We talked about that a little bit earlier. What is the intention behind the power? What is your purpose in utilizing that power? Is it power that can be creative together as an effective force with another person, for example? Power with? Is it power over? That is control. Can I coerce or overpower this person in a way that they will accommodate what I want? But it's possible and desirable to have a relationship in which there is, like Linda said, shared power, where we each are able to experience the truth of our own abilities without diminishing the other person, without winning something over them, going back to the whole win-lose situation.
West Coast Mindfulness Institute is a networking group for mindfulness-oriented clinicians who are dedicated to learning together and collaborating to better serve our community. WCMI hosts educational events for both clinicians and members of the public to promote learning, growth, and self-awareness. If you're seeking support, follow the link in this episode where our referral specialists will connect you to the right therapist to meet your needs. Visit us at wcminstitute.net.
Linda, do you want to say anything more? Or you?
I do. You know, the book that we're working on here on our writing retreat right now.
You heard it here first, folks. The book. Here we go. Okay, what is it?
This is The Habits of Exemplary Couples.
Oh, great.
And this is anecdotal research that we've done over our more than 40 years in the field. And because we've seen so many suffering couples who are struggling and fighting and hopelessness, despair, resentment, all kinds of things, we purposefully sought out the highest functioning couples that we could find and interviewed them. We wrote one book, Secrets of Great Marriages, and this one is about the characteristics that they have in common.
Hmm.
The highest functioning couples that we have are really champions in a number of areas, particularly in this area about sharing power well.
Hmm.
They have worked out the balance, in such a way that they trust that their needs are not less important than the other person's needs.
Hmm.
Not more important, not less important, but they know how to calibrate so that both people's needs are met on a very consistent basis. So they argue less because they're not fearful and distrustful that if I don't grab power over the other person, they're going to grab power over me. That gets set to rest.
That's a really high level of consciousness. I think I like that. I love that idea. And I'm feeling it as you're speaking. And just this idea of, it takes a high level awareness, intelligence, and I think also attunement, emotional attunement, empathy, and knowing your partner to do that, because there's this idea of holding it in your mind in real time. What I say, what I do, everything you say and do. How can we create this environment where I can help you feel satisfied with your own needs and desires and wants, and I'm not overpowering you, but we can do that. We can empower each other. There's mutual empowerment occurring at the same time, and I'm holding in my mind how to do that, and considering you in the process, not just me, but you, both of us. And I think that's a real critical evolutionary step in consciousness to do that.
I think it's true, and I think that many of us, when we look at some of the things that you just mentioned in terms of what it actually requires to be sufficiently skillful, because we are talking about the development not only of practices and habits, but of skills that are necessary in order to really be able to do the two seemingly contradictory, to create the two seemingly contradictory experiences that relationships require of us. It seems paradoxical, but we have to be both committed to the partnership and to relate to each other from a perspective that our intention is to support the promotion of their well-being without neglecting our own personal needs.
Mm.
Some of us are wired through our whatever we've learned in life or from wherever it came from, to be very geared towards focusing on other people.
Yeah.
And wanting to make sure that we can read them, that we can understand what's going to make them tick. And that's kind of where our go-to is. Some of us are more self-reflective, more predisposed to think in terms of, what's in it for me here? How can I get my needs met?
Yeah.
Truth, of course, is that we have to be able to do both.
It's fascinating because I'm just thinking in terms of labels, because us psychologists, I'm a psychologist at heart, neuropsychologist, whatever. We think about you think about codependency, very much about fixing, caring for, rescuing, making sure my partner's good. And then there's a certain level of narcissism about me and being me-centric and how do I fulfill my own needs and not being empathic toward you. Yeah. Those are polarities, essentially. And I think that the healthy place is in the middle, what we're talking about, not the duality of it, but in the middle, where you can be able to do that. Which is, I imagine when I can't wait for this book to come out, by the way, because I think this is going to be a really good book. I have a thought. I know you two are very, you're constantly learning and curious, which I think makes you really special people to me, and part of why I love you guys so much.
Thank you.
And I mean that. But when you're interviewing these couples, or in the midst of their relationship, and you're sharing space with them and learning about them and discovering the commonalities, have you picked up on things in that process and go, wow, we got to do this? Like, these are things that Charlie and I, or Lynn and I, we have to this is a good one. This is something we got to look at. Has there been anything you've picked up from that process that you've used that maybe you weren't doing as much of?
Absolutely. We've learned a lot over the years from some of these really exemplary couples, and I use things that I've learned from them. When one of us is out of the house doing errands or going to the gym and we come home and somebody's in the house, say I'm coming back from the gym, I yell out, "Honey, I'm home." And Charlie says, "Hooray." We learned that from one of the couples that we interviewed for the Secrets of Great Marriages.
Cool.
Yeah, and when we teach our courses, do you know, we're taking the course along with the other students there. So
Yeah.
we're always building a better mousetrap. You know, we're refining how we think about things and improving our communication skills. So I'm deep gratitude to my students and to our clients. I've learned a ton over the years. And one of the things that's been really helpful, and Charlie helped me to see it when we were working with couples, because of opposites attract, you know, and complements attract. There usually is one in the pair that's more on the self-sacrificing side, and the other one that's a little bit more self-absorbed.
Yes.
I would be more identified with the one. It's not always the woman, by the way, but it's often the woman who's taken the temperature of the relationship and more attuned to what the relationship needs. And the man comes from a different culture. And so he's maybe more concerned about building his career. And Charlie taught me about enlightened self-interest. And I watched him, and I do it all the time with clients now who are on the sacrificing end, to appeal to the more self-centered one about their enlightened self-interest, because there's so much in it for them. If they listen to the person who knows what the relationship needs to up level, it's going to come back multi times to them in benefits. Just, you know, feeling at ease in their own home, feeling at ease to bring up anything that is on their heart and on their mind. It's going to be beneficial, and you have to be deliberate about appealing to the people who tend to be on the self-centered side about what they stand to gain from it.
That's great, Linda. Thank you. Very well put. Charlie, you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I just loved your question, Jim, because I haven't received that question too much about what we have gained from the process of working with these couples. And two words came to my mind when I reflected on that. And one was inspiration.
Mm-hmm.
I have been so profoundly inspired by so many of the people, individuals, couples, who have come to us, who have, many of whom have reached a point in their life where they have felt forced to confront some things that they have been avoiding throughout their life. They weren't sure exactly what was there. They have been resisting to looking at any of that part of their life. But they finally hit a place where they can't continue to deny that there's some stuff that they've really got to take a look at, even though they don't know exactly what it is. And sometimes it comes up in it shows up as a breakdown in the relationship. It could show up as a breakdown in their health or their mental health, or some loss in their life. Something motivates them. And they have made the choice to step into the unknown, which, requires a certain degree, a large degree of courage, and do the work. And it is work to move from that place of breakdown into breakthrough.
Yeah.
And I found that so inspiring, to see how so many people can find within themselves something that when they're facing what can seem like an impossible circumstance, that they can step into that challenge and be vulnerable enough to ask for the help that they need.
Yeah.
And so I really, I felt great inspiration for that. The other thing that I felt was humility.
Yeah.
Because there have been so many times when we would be working with a couple, I would make some kind of an assessment to myself that, I don't know whether these guys can make it. I don't think they're going to be able to do it. They're just I don't ever, neither one of us ever advises people to end a relationship or to divorce. Yeah. We always try to support them to get clear about what's the right thing for them to do. But sometimes in my thinking, I would have great doubts that they could make it through. They just seem too stuck. And so many times I've been wrong. And, when you feel something, when you're really certain about something, it's really hard to break out of that conviction. And yet sometimes I realize that even when I'm that certain about things, it's not necessarily true. Yeah. And so that's the humility that I often have needed to question my own belief. It's not my truth. It's my belief and my opinion. And there's a big difference there. And that's helped me to become much more receptive and open-minded and to question things that I assume are essentially correct.
So if you believe it, it doesn't mean it's essentially correct?
Don't believe everything you think.
I love the humility piece. It's so important. Actually, I want to just a couple of things about your book, and I want to shift to another topic here in a minute. But this idea of it's never too late to have a good childhood. Okay, and when you think about, I've known you a while. I haven't gone into a lot of detail about your childhood. I don't know how much you know about mine. I've shared some things too, and we don't need to get into your whole childhood here. We don't have enough time in this podcast for that. But do you think that in some ways has your discovery process of being in a relationship and overcoming challenges yourself and then studying all these amazing couples, both the ones that struggle and the ones who are exceptional, do you find that there's a way that relationships can heal your childhood, that through the relationship, through intimacy, through closeness, through the dynamic between two individuals in a couplehood, that you can clean up or repair or heal your childhood, and also maybe create some of the innocence and some of the things in your childhood you never got to experience in the partnership? What are your thoughts about that?
Absolutely. The healing does take place if you use your relationship intentionally to do that. Extraordinary, unbelievable healing can take place. Now, Judith Wallerstein calls it a rescue marriage. And sometimes only one of the pair has had a very difficult beginning in life. And so their spouse in some ways nurtures them, provides a trusting environment. In our case, it was rescue marriage on both sides because we both had rough beginnings in our family of origin. And so if you were neglected, abandoned, weren't seen, weren't heard, when you have somebody in your life who really shows up, it heals that place about feeling unimportant and, less than, worthless. And it helps you get your sense of self. If you were controlled, and you were in this dominating environment and you finally have somebody who treats you in respect. Well, where do you want to go? What do you want to do? And your opinion is important and they're not insisting on controlling and having their way. It's an extraordinary healing. So whether you were abandoned or whether you were micromanaged, whether you were compared to your, genius sibling and always felt less than, when somebody thinks that you're creative, you're intelligent, you're wonderful, that heals those wounds from the past. Now, I don't say that it heals them 100%.
Mm-hmm.
I believe what Ram Dass says about we never get cured of our neuroses, we only get bored. There's only so many times you can go over the things from the past. But I'd say the bulk of it, the huge wounds that you come into adulthood with good therapy, good workshops. I'm also about that.
Yeah.
But when you have a devoted partner who is committed to healing and learning and growth with you, and you make sacred vows together that you're going to have a personal growth relationship, then I think extraordinary things are available. That you don't have to drag that heavy baggage with you anymore.
Thank you. I want to shift a little bit to a prelude for the conference that you're going to be at, and looking at the connection or nexus between arguing and intimacy and arguing and sex. And what are your thoughts about the role that the benefit of ending arguing, or at least reducing the frequency of arguing, could have in terms of intimacy, love, and sex? What are your thoughts about that?
Well, arguments, in the sense that I was describing them earlier, are can be a serious impediment to pleasurable experiences, including sex. And we call them incompletions. When there's a difference of opinion that people are having that has not been adequately addressed, that doesn't mean that you both have to come to the same conclusion. It just means that you have to have a sense of completion. You have to have a sense that, okay, well, I think we understand each other now. We're on different pages about this, but we've come to a point for the time being that we can both live with the situation as it is. And we call that a sense of completion. And it's the key phrase there, of course, for the time being, because at some point we probably are going to want to revisit this and see if we can get a little bit further into what it is that might help us to become even more complete. So, the best one of the best aphrodisiacs is for both people to feel comfortable with each other, and there isn't any unaddressed baggage that they're bringing into this moment. All too many people, such a huge percentage of the people that we see come to us with stuff that has been simmering on the back burner for years, sometimes decades. And that is, in my opinion, that is one of the primary factors, unresolved, unaddressed, undealt with differences that are incomplete. And we don't even like to use the term conflict resolution, because some things just are never, like Linda said, they're never completely, absolutely resolved to both people's, complete satisfaction. But at least to get to a point where they're no longer draining our energy, where they're no longer preoccupying our attention, they're not continuing to drain us in some way. So I think it's not that the presence of differences, it's the way in which the differences are holding us, or where we're holding them, how we're holding them, that can either enhance or diminish our capacity to be totally present, totally vulnerable, totally open to this other person when we're having an intimate engagement, whether it's sexually, emotionally, or in any way.
Okay. Good. Linda, you want to say anything?
Yes, I wanted to add that as a relationship matures and as the people in the partnership get older, you don't have the volcanic, hormone-driven energy to burn through the resentment and incompletions that are clogging up the channel in between.
Mm-hmm.
So it's even more important to deal with the issues so that they're not in the way, so that there can be a free flowing emotional intimacy, and so that the erotic charge can be exchanged easily. And so the young couples, they've got enough to burn through, but eventually you have to learn this fine art of communication and negotiation and put that level of safety and security and challenge in the relationship so that there is this free flowing of the energetic. And I can't emphasize the importance of that enough. Do it sooner rather than later. Don't put it off. You can get away with it.
I like the way you address the changing experience for people in terms of when they get older, what's required of them. You can't just rely on makeup sex or burning through passion to resolve conflict, or not resolve, but reduce the temperature on conflict and to manage incompletions. Last question for you. Do you see in couples you work with that sex can get better as a couples age together? Have you seen examples of that? And if so, what helps? What do you think about that?
Absolutely, because when they get their other relationship skills working for them, it's nature's gift for us to be able to bring pleasure to each other sexually, that our bodies are aroused, and I'm totally believe that they're healed, and the research says that it's true, because the people with the really, really good relationships, they have less cancer, less heart disease, less hospitalization, less medication. They live longer. And so I think that those endorphins, and all that oxytocin that's running through our bloodstream is giving us live messages. So when you haven't mastered the skills required, the conflict management skills, the communication skills, the negotiation skills, the skills around apology and forgiveness and repair, it is going to keep our level of satisfaction, sexual and in general, at a lower level. And when we get those skills and develop the qualities required for a great relationship, that is going to allow the relationship to be better and the sexual relationship to improve. And we see that quite regularly with the people that we work with.
That's encouraging. Charlie, going to add to that?
Just quickly to reaffirm everything that Linda just said. Absolutely no doubt in my mind that sex does not have to become stagnated, as many people fear that it will, after a certain period of time. It's not. It does happen for many people, but it's not an inevitable outcome or an inevitable aspect of the aging process, at least not from my experience and from the experience of many other people that I know. But there are certain things, if you just kind of leave the sexual experience up to the other person, or up to some circumstance beyond your control, that's probably what you're going to get. You're going to get a diminished level of satisfaction, because as our bodies and minds change, as we mature and get older, we have to make adjustments to all kinds of different areas in our life, physically, mentally, emotionally. We're going through changes. And if we're not adapting to those changes, if we're not taking responsibility for continuing to thrive in different areas of our life and making the necessary adjustments to it, things will stagnate, because the changes in our development are going to require us to address and approach certain experiences in a different way. So the nature of how we engage sexually, what we do, how we relate to each other during that, and of course, like I said earlier, how much of the baggage we've cleared out of the way, that's going to determine or be a huge factor as far as what our experience is. But can be, we know people who are even older than we are, believe it or not, who really still, get it on.
Yeah.
And but they have taken responsibility for looking at this from a level of what can I do, what can we do to continue to have these experiences be juicy, and to really take that on as a commitment that they're both sharing.
Thank you, Charlie. You have always inspired me, and we break down that term from in spirit. When you're breathing in, it's inspiration, and I breathe in inspiration when I listen to you and I talk to you, when I have the ability to spend some time with you, which is always great. And I was hoping that we could leave this conversation. I really thank you for your time, with a poem. And Linda, I'm wondering if you would regale us with a poem, if you could do that.
Yes, and I believe that the secret of life is becoming a loving person, and really living your life from that place. And so this line in this poem by Raymond Carver really, really touches me. Did you get what you want from this life, even so? Yes, I did. To call myself beloved, to feel myself beloved on this earth.
Thank you. All right. Thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. And podcast listeners, look for their books, maybe even the next one coming up, but at least the most recent one. And An End to Arguing is an amazing read. Hope you all enjoy it. Thanks for your time. Looking forward to seeing you November 1st for the conference, and then hopefully before that as well. So thank you so much for your time. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Always a pleasure.
Thanks.
As always, please rate and review. Your opinions are really important to us. Thank you for listening, and see you next time.